The sky above New Terra Colony was calm that morning. Soft orange light touched the tall glass towers. Children were walking to school. Traders were opening their shops. It was just another normal day at the edge of human space. Then the sky broke apart. A massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace right above the colony. Hundreds of dark, sharp-edged warships filled the sky like a black storm. Their engines glowed red, throwing long shadows over the city below. People stopped walking. They stared up, frozen. Children pointed at the sky. A woman dropped her grocery bag and it spilled onto the street. But she didn't notice. Every eye in the colony was locked on those ships. Inside the colony's defense station, alarms began to scream. Captain Elena Voss was drinking her morning coffee when the alert hit her screen. She didn't jump. She didn't shout. She simply set the cup down, wiped her mouth, and walked to the command chair like she had done 100 times before. "Report," she said, her voice steady. A young officer, barely 25 years old, spun around in his seat. His face was pale. "Captain, it's them. The Krill Empire, full invasion fleet. Sensors show at least 300 warships, maybe more." Elena looked at the main screen. The fleet above them was enormous, blotting out the stars. She had read about the Krill before, a proud ancient empire that ruled a huge part of the galaxy. They were known for one thing: they never lost a war. "Open a channel," Elena said calmly. "Let's hear what they have to say." The officer's hands were shaking, but he did as told. The main screen flickered and an alien face appeared. His skin was pale gray, almost like stone. His eyes were narrow and sharp, like a hawk's. He wore golden armor with strange symbols carved into it. This was Grand Emperor Threxul, ruler of the Krill Empire. He looked down at the tiny human figures on his screen with open disgust. "Humans," Threxul said, his voice deep and cold like metal scraping on metal. "Small, weak, and foolish creatures. You dared to join the Galactic Alliance. You dared to stand beside my enemies." Elena said nothing. She just watched him, her arms crossed. Threxul continued, his voice growing louder. "Today, the Krill Empire declares war, not just on the Alliance, on humanity itself. Your colonies will burn, your ships will fall, your species will be erased from the stars like a stain wiped clean." The room went silent. Even the young officer stopped shaking, too shocked to move. Then Elena did something nobody expected. She smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Just a small, quiet one, the kind you give an old friend you haven't seen in years. She leaned forward slightly and said, "Oh, good. It's been a while." Threxul's eyes narrowed. For a creature that had conquered 100 worlds, this was not the reaction he expected. Fear, panic, begging, that is what he expected, not this. "You find this funny, human?" he snapped. Elena shrugged one shoulder. "Not funny, just familiar." The channel cut off. Threxul's face vanished from the screen, replaced with the dark shapes of his warships, still hanging above the colony like a blade above a neck. The young officer turned to Elena, his voice shaking. "Captain, what do we do? We don't have enough ships to fight that fleet. We don't have enough anything." Elena stood up from her chair. She walked slowly toward the window, looking up at the alien fleet through the reinforced glass. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. "Sound the colony alarm," she said. "Get the civilians into the shelters. Then send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them the Krill have declared war." "And what do we tell them to do, Captain?" Elena's eyes stayed on the fleet above. A small, strange light flickered behind them, like a memory waking up after a long sleep. "Tell them," she said quietly, "to open the old vaults." Far away, on the human capital world of Meridian, the news spread like fire through dry grass. In the Grand Alliance Council Hall, alien leaders from a dozen different species sat in a circle arguing. A tall, blue-skinned Alliance diplomat named Sella stood at the center, her hands trembling as she read the emergency report. "The Krill Empire has declared war on humanity," she said, her voice shaking. "Not just a border conflict, a full invasion. Grand Emperor Threxul himself gave the declaration." Gasps and murmurs filled the hall. One alien delegate, a short creature with rough green skin, stood up quickly. "This is a disaster," he said. "The Krill haven't lost a war in 300 years. If they crush the humans, the whole alliance could fall next." Another delegate, tall and insect-like, clicked his mandibles nervously. "The humans have barely been part of the alliance for 20 years. They are the newest, weakest members. Why would the Krill bother with them?" Sella looked down at her notes. "That's what worries me. The Krill don't waste resources on weak targets. If they are sending their entire Western fleet against human colonies, they must see humans as a real threat." The green-skinned delegate laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Humans? A threat? They don't even have proper shields on half their ships. Their fleet is smaller than ours by 10 times. At the back of the hall, an old alien scientist named Dr. Yara Vex sat quietly listening. She was different from the others. Calm, thoughtful, always watching more than speaking. She had spent the last 15 years studying humans, ever since they first joined the Alliance. She raised her hand slowly. The room quieted down out of respect. Yara was known as the leading Alliance expert on human history and behavior. "May I say something?" she asked. Sella nodded. "Please, Dr. Vex." Yara stood up, her old joints creaking slightly. "I have studied humans for a very long time. Their technology, yes, it is behind ours in many ways. Their fleet, yes, it is small, but there is something in human history that troubles me." "What is that?" Sella asked. Yara's eyes grew distant, like she was remembering something painful. "There are gaps, missing records, long stretches of human history that are simply blank. No wars listed, no major events. Just silence, for almost 200 years, buried deep in their old records." The insect-like delegate tilted his head. "Perhaps humans simply had peaceful centuries. Many species do." Yara shook her head slowly. "I do not think it was peace, Counselor. I think something happened during those years. Something the humans do not talk about. And every time I have tried to ask them directly—" "Yes?" Sella leaned forward. "They changed the subject," Yara said quietly. "Every single time." A cold silence fell over the hall. Back on New Terra Colony, the shelters were filling fast. Families ran through the streets carrying children and small bags of belongings. Sirens wailed across the city. Above them, the Krill fleet still hung in the sky, waiting, like predators enjoying the fear of their prey before the hunt began. Inside the command station, Elena stood watching the fleet, her hands folded behind her back. The young officer, whose name was Private Rowan, walked up beside her, still nervous. "Captain, I don't understand," Rowan said. "You seem so calm. Everyone else is terrified. Even I'm terrified. But you look like you already know how this ends." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to him. "Rowan, how old are you?" 25, Captain." "Then you were born long after the old stories stopped being told out loud," she said. "Let me ask you something. Has anyone ever told you why human military ships are still built with old-style hulls? Heavier steel plating instead of light alloy? Why our soldiers still train with basic hand weapons, not just energy guns?" Rowan blinked. I always thought it was because humans were behind in technology, that we couldn't afford better." Elena smiled slightly, but there was something sad in it. "That's what the Alliance thinks too. That's what most humans think too, honestly. But it's not the real reason." "Then what is the real reason?" Before Elena could answer, an alarm chimed on the main console. A new signal was coming in, not from the Krill fleet, but from deep within human territory. Rowan rushed to check it. "Captain, it's a priority message from Fleet Command, direct from Admiral Grant." Elena walked over quickly. The screen showed a message written in old-style code, the kind used only for the most secret and serious communications. Rowan read the words out loud, his voice growing more confused with every line. "To all colony commanders, Krill Empire has declared full war. Authorization confirmed. Opening Directive 01. Repeat, Opening Directive 01. All fleet commanders report to designated coordinates for reactivation of the old guard." Rowan looked up at Elena, completely lost. "Captain, what is Directive 01? What is the old guard? I've never heard of either of these in any training manual." Elena's eyes were fixed on the screen. Her calm expression didn't break, but something behind her eyes shifted, like a door long locked was finally creaking open. "You wouldn't have," she said softly. "It's not in any manual anyone your age has ever read." "Then how do you know about it?" Elena turned to face him fully now. For the first time since the fleet arrived, her voice carried real weight, real history behind it. "Because my grandmother told me about it when I was a child," she said. And her grandmother told her. It's a story passed down generation to generation in certain military families. A story about the last time humanity faced true extinction. A story about the war we never talk about. Rowan's mouth went dry. "What war?" Outside the window, the krill fleet began to move, slowly tightening its formation above the colony, preparing for the first strike. Elena looked at the fleet, then back at Rowan. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The war that taught humanity how to survive against enemies far stronger than us," she said. "The war we buried so deep, even the Alliance forgot to ask about it properly." A distant boom echoed through the colony. The first warning shot from the krill fleet, striking harmlessly near the outer shield, just to show they meant business. Rowan flinched, but Elena didn't move an inch. "Get every ship ready," she said, her voice suddenly sharp and commanding. "Send the activation code to every human colony in this sector. Tell them it's time to remember." "Remember what, Captain?" Elena's eyes turned back to the alien fleet above, glowing with quiet, dangerous calm. "Who we really are," she said. The alarms kept blaring. The krill fleet kept gathering. And somewhere, deep in human space, old ships that hadn't flown in a century began to wake up in their hidden docks, engines humming back to life for the first time in generations. The galaxy had just declared war on humanity. But humanity, it seemed, had been waiting for this fight for a very long time. 3 days had passed since the Krill Empire declared war. On New Terra Colony, the sky was still dark with alien warships, but no attack had come yet. Grand Emperor Threxel was waiting, watching, studying his enemy before he crushed them. He wanted to understand what he was facing, even if he already believed the answer was nothing important. Far away on the Alliance capital world of Meridian, Dr. Yara Vex sat alone in her private research office. The walls were covered with old star charts, human history books, and strange metal artifacts collected from human worlds over the years. She had not slept much these past 3 days. Something about this war felt different to her, and she needed to know why. She sat at her desk staring at an old data file. It was a human military record from almost 200 years ago. The file was labeled simply, "Classified, Archive Locked." Every time she tried to open it, the same message appeared. "Access denied by human government authority." She sighed and leaned back in her chair. In 15 years of studying humans, she had never seen a species so strange. They were friendly. They were curious. They loved music, art, food, and laughter. They welcomed other species into their homes without fear. In many ways, they seemed like the gentlest species in the whole Alliance. But there was always this locked door in their history, this silence about certain events. And now, faced with total war from the mighty Krill Empire, humans were not panicking. They were calm, almost ready. A soft knock came at her office door. "Come in," Yara said. The door opened, and a young Alliance officer named Kip stepped inside. He was human, actually. One of the few humans working directly for the Alliance government instead of the human military. He had short brown hair and tired eyes, like he hadn't slept either. "Dr. Vex," Kip said, "you asked to see me?" Yara nodded and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Yes, please sit. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Kip sat down slowly. "I'll try my best." Yara turned her computer screen so he could see it. The locked file glowed on the display. Do you know what this is? Kip's eyes moved over the file name. His face changed slightly, just a small flicker, but Yara noticed it immediately. She had studied human expressions for years. That flicker was recognition. I'm not sure, Kip said, but his voice was less certain now. Kip, Yara said gently, I have known you for 3 years. You have always been honest with me. Please, don't start hiding things now, not when the fate of your species might depend on the truth. Kip was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the locked file, then at Yara, then down at his hands. There are stories, he finally said. Old stories. Most humans today don't really believe them. They think it's just folklore, legend, like ghost stories your grandmother tells you at night. What kind of stories? Kip took a deep breath. Stories about a war. A long time ago, before humans ever left our solar system properly, before we even met other species like you. A war against something so terrible, so dangerous, that it almost wiped out humanity completely. Yara leaned forward. What was this enemy? Kip shook his head. Nobody really knows anymore. The records are gone, locked away, or destroyed. Some people say it was another human group, gone wrong somehow. Some people say it wasn't human at all, something that came from outside, long before the Alliance found us. And humanity won this war? Kip nodded slowly. That's the story, yes. Humanity won. But barely. And the cost was so terrible, so painful, that the leaders back then decided to bury it, lock away the records, teach children a cleaned-up version of history instead. Let the real story fade into legend so future generations wouldn't have to carry that weight. Yara sat back, her mind racing. But some things were kept. Some things were passed down. Yes, Kip said quietly. Old military traditions, old ship designs, old training methods. Things that seem strange or old-fashioned to outsiders, but actually come from lessons learned in that terrible war. Things humans kept, just in case. Just in case of what? Kip looked up, his eyes serious now. Just in case it ever happened again. Meanwhile, back on New Terra Colony, Captain Elena Voss was standing in a massive underground hangar, a place that had not been opened in over 80 years. Dust covered everything. Old lights flickered on one by one as she walked deeper inside, revealing rows and rows of sleeping warships. These were not modern human ships. They were bigger, heavier, built from thick metal plating instead of light modern materials. Strange weapons were mounted on their hulls, weapons that Elena had only read about in old training books, never seen in real life. Private Rowan walked beside her, his mouth open in shock. Captain, what is this place? This, Elena said, running her hand along the cold metal hull of the nearest ship, is one of the old guard vaults. There are 12 of them, hidden across human space. Most people don't even know they exist. But why hide them? Why not use ships like this all the time if they're so powerful? Elena turned to him. Because these ships were built for one purpose only, fighting an enemy so dangerous, so relentless, that normal ships couldn't survive against them. If we used ships like this every day, the Alliance would ask questions. They would want to know why humans needed weapons this heavy, this aggressive, and we weren't ready to answer those questions. Are we ready now? Elena's eyes moved across the sleeping fleet, hundreds of ships slowly waking up, lights blinking on across their hulls like eyes opening after a long sleep. We don't have a choice anymore, she said. Suddenly, a deep, mechanical voice echoed through the hangar. It was the ship's central computer system, activating for the first time in decades. Old guard protocol activated. Welcome back, Commander Voss. Rowan turned to Elena in shock. Commander Voss? Captain, I thought you were just a colony defense captain. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. There's a lot about me you don't know, Rowan. A lot about all of us you don't know. Us? My family, Elena said, walking further into the hangar. We've served in the Old Guard for 6 generations. My grandmother fought in the last real activation of this fleet almost 60 years ago, during a smaller conflict that never made it into Alliance history books. She trained my mother. My mother trained me. Rowan followed her, his mind struggling to process everything. Trained you for what exactly? Elena stopped in front of the largest ship in the hangar, a massive vessel that dwarfed everything else around it. Its name was painted on the hull in old-style lettering, Remembrance. For this day, Elena said quietly, the day the galaxy would finally test us again. Back in the Alliance Council Hall, tension was rising. More reports were coming in from human colonies across the border, old ships waking up, old defense systems activating, entire fleets appearing out of nowhere from hidden locations nobody in the Alliance even knew existed. The green-skinned delegate, whose name was Counselor Dross, stood up angrily during the emergency session. This is outrageous. Humans have hidden fleets from the Alliance? Secret shipyards? What else are they hiding from us? Sela, the blue-skinned diplomat, tried to calm the room. Counselor, please, we don't know the full situation yet. We don't need to know the full situation, Dross snapped. We need to know why our newest, supposedly weakest member has been hiding an entire secret military force for who knows how long. Dr. Yarovec stood up from her seat near the back, her voice cutting through the noise. Perhaps, Counselor, if you stop shouting for a moment, we could actually learn something useful. The room quieted, mostly out of surprise. Yara rarely spoke with such a firm tone. I have spent 15 years studying humans, Yara continued. And in all that time I always sensed something hidden beneath their friendly surface. Not maliciousness, not deception in the way you're suggesting, Counselor, but caution. A deep, old caution, passed down through generations, about revealing too much of themselves. Caution about what? Dross demanded. Yara's eyes moved to the large view screen at the front of the hall, now showing live footage from the human border colonies. Massive old warships rising from hidden underground hangars, painted with strange symbols and old-fashioned designs, completely unlike anything currently in Alliance registries. I believe, Yara said slowly, that humans have been hiding their true strength from us. Not out of malice, but out of fear of what might happen if the galaxy knew what they were truly capable of. Sela frowned. Capable of what, Dr. Vex? Yara's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, on the endless rows of ancient warships rising into the sky like sleeping giants finally waking up. Winning, she said quietly. I believe humans are capable of winning wars that should be impossible to win, and I believe they've done it before. On New Terra Colony, the underground hangar was now fully alive with activity. Engineers rushed between ships, checking systems, running diagnostics. Pilots, young men and women who had trained for this moment their whole lives without fully understanding why, climbed into cockpits with steady hands and serious eyes. Elena stood on a raised platform overlooking the entire hangar, watching her people prepare. Rowan stood beside her, still absorbing everything he had learned in the past hour. Captain, he said, if this old guard fleet is so powerful, why didn't we just use it from the start? Why wait for the Krill to attack first? Elena kept her eyes on the ships below. Because war is not something we want, Rowan. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way a long time ago. We don't wake up the old guard for small conflicts, or for pride, or for power. We wake it up only when there is no other choice left. Only when someone else forces our hand. And Threxel forced your hand. Threxel, Elena said, her voice hardening slightly, made the same mistake every enemy makes before facing humanity in a true fight. He looked at our numbers, our size, our newer technology, and decided we were weak. He didn't look deep enough into our history to understand what we really are. And what are we, Captain? Really? Elena finally turned to look at him, her eyes calm but serious, carrying the weight of 6 generations of hidden knowledge. We are a species that has already faced extinction once and refused to disappear, she said. We built these ships, trained these tactics, and buried this history so deep that even we sometimes forget it ourselves. But it's still there, Rowan, sleeping, waiting, and now it's awake again. Below them, the massive ship called Remembrance powered up fully, its engines glowing bright blue, lighting up the entire underground hangar like a rising sun. Rowan watched in silence, feeling something shift inside him. Not fear, but a strange, quiet pride he didn't fully understand yet. "Captain," he said softly, "what happens now?" Elena looked out over her waking fleet, her expression calm, almost peaceful, like someone greeting an old friend after a very long time apart. "Now," she said, "we show the galaxy what happens when they wake up something they should have left sleeping." Above them, far beyond the underground hangar, the Krill fleet still hovered over the colony, waiting, watching, completely unaware of what was stirring beneath the ground they thought they controlled. The first real battle was coming, and humanity, quietly, patiently, was more than ready for it. 4 days after the declaration of war, the sky above New Terra Colony had not changed. The Krill fleet still hung there, dark and silent, like a storm cloud that refused to break. Emperor Threxel was in no hurry. He wanted the humans to feel the weight of his ships pressing down on them day after day, until fear crushed their spirits before a single shot was fired. But something strange was happening down on the colony. The panic that should have been there was fading. In its place came a quiet, steady calm that even the alien allies stationed nearby found unsettling. At the Alliance outpost near New Terra, a small group of alien officers watched the human colony through their sensors, confused by what they saw. "They're not evacuating," said Commander Thessa, a tall, silver-skinned alien from the Vantor species, one of the Alliance's oldest and most cautious members. She stood in front of a large view screen, arms crossed. "Their ships are moving in formation. Their soldiers are training. It's like they're preparing for a parade, not an invasion." Beside her stood a younger officer, an insect-like being named Crix, his antennae twitching nervously. "Perhaps they don't understand the danger, Commander. Humans are new to real war. Maybe they simply don't know how afraid they should be." Thessa shook her head slowly. "No. I've read the reports coming out of their command centers. They know exactly how dangerous the Krill are. They're not confused. They're prepared." "Prepared for what? They don't have the ships to fight a fleet that size." Thessa's eyes narrowed as she looked at a new report scrolling across her screen. Sensor readings showing old ships rising from hidden locations deep within human territory. Ships with designs the Alliance database didn't even recognize. "I'm not so sure about that anymore," she said quietly. Down on the colony surface, Captain Elena Voss walked through rows of soldiers training in an open field. The old guard ships from the underground hangar had been moved into position at the edge of the colony, hidden just behind the tree line, powered down to avoid drawing attention from orbital sensors. For now, they would wait. Elena watched her soldiers practice hand-to-hand combat drills, old-fashioned techniques passed down through generations, techniques that seemed almost outdated compared to modern energy weapons and shields. Private Rowan walked beside her, watching the training with growing curiosity. "Captain, why are we still training with these old methods? We have energy rifles, we have shield generators. Why practice fighting with our hands?" Elena watched a young soldier flip her training partner onto the ground with practiced ease. "Because technology fails, Rowan. Shields run out of power, rifles jam, or run out of charge. But the human body and human will, that never runs out of power. That's a lesson we learned the hard way a long time ago." "From the old war." "From the old war," Elena confirmed. As they walked, a young engineer ran up to Elena, breathless. "Captain, we have a situation. Long-range sensors picked up a Krill scout ship. It broke away from the main fleet and is heading toward Outpost 7. Elena's calm expression sharpened slightly. Outpost 7 was a small farming settlement on the edge of the colony's border, home to about 200 civilians, mostly farmers and their families. It had almost no defenses. "How long until it arrives?" Elena asked. 15 minutes, Captain." Elena turned to Rowan. "Get me a comm line to Outpost 7 now." At Outpost 7, the small farming settlement looked peaceful under the afternoon sun. Fields of golden wheat stretched across the land, and children played near the edge of the village, unaware of the danger approaching from above. Inside the small command building, an old farmer named Hendrix, who also served as the settlement's part-time militia leader, received the emergency call from Elena. "Hendrix here," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Hendrix, this is Captain Voss." Elena's voice came through the speaker. "A Krill scout ship is heading your way. It will arrive in less than 10 minutes now. I need you to get everyone into the shelters immediately." Hendrix frowned. "Captain, we don't have proper shelters here. Just some old storm cellars from back when we worried about weather. Not alien invasions." "Then use those," Elena said. "And Hendrix, listen carefully. Do you still have that old defense turret? The one from the original colony charter near the North Field?" Hendrix's eyes widened slightly. "The old Sentinel gun?" "Captain, that thing hasn't been fired in 30 years. It's older than half the farmers in this village." "Does it still work?" There was a pause. "We keep it maintained, out of tradition mostly. Never thought we'd actually need it." Elena's voice grew firm. "Get someone on it. Now." High above the atmosphere, the Krill scout ship descended smoothly through the clouds. A sleek, arrow-shaped vessel painted in dark gray and gold, the colors of the Krill Empire. Inside, the ship's commander, a young Krill officer named Vex Thal, looked over the sensor readings of the small farming settlement below with obvious boredom. "Just farmers," Vex Thal said to his co-pilot, a shorter Krill soldier named Grix. "No military presence detected. This will be an easy demonstration for the Emperor's records." Grix nodded eagerly. "Should we destroy the settlement completely, or just enough to send a message?" Vexthal smiled coldly. "Let's start with a message. Target the central buildings. Leave enough survivors to spread fear through the rest of the colony." The scout ship lowered further, weapon systems charging with a low, ominous hum. Down below, the villagers had already begun rushing toward the old storm cellars, parents carrying children, everyone moving as fast as they could. But at the Northfield, an old farmer named Betty Hendrix, Hendrix's own wife actually, and a former colony defense operator from decades ago, climbed into the seat of the ancient Sentinel gun, her weathered hands moving across controls she hadn't touched in 30 years but still remembered perfectly. "Come on, old girl," she muttered to the gun, patting the control panel gently. "One more time." The Sentinel gun powered up with a deep groaning sound, its old systems creaking back to life. It wasn't a fancy weapon. It wasn't even particularly modern. But it was heavy, reliable, and built to last, much like the people who had built it. The Krill scout ship dropped lower, preparing to fire its first shot at the settlement's central square. Betty's eyes narrowed as she tracked the ship through the gun's old targeting scope. Her hands were steady, despite her age, despite the fear she felt inside. This was for her grandchildren, playing somewhere in those storm cellars right now. "Come a little closer," she whispered. The Krill ship fired its first warning shot, a bright energy blast that struck the ground near the village entrance, throwing dirt and debris into the air, more to frighten than to harm. That was the mistake Vexthal didn't know he was making. Betty pulled the trigger. The old Sentinel gun roared to life, firing a massive shell that tore through the sky with surprising speed and accuracy. The shell struck the Krill scout ship directly on its underside, right where the shields were weakest. The explosion was massive. The scout ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring inside the cockpit. Vexthal was thrown from his seat, his cold expression replaced instantly with shock and confusion. "What was that? Report. What just hit us?" Grix scrambled to check the sensors, his hands shaking. "Sir, it came from the ground. Some kind of old projectile weapon. Shields are down to 60%. Vexthal stared at the display in disbelief. His scout ship, one of the most advanced vessels in the Krill fleet, had just been struck by what appeared to be an ancient primitive weapon from a supposedly weak farming settlement. "That's impossible," he snarled. "Return fire. Destroy that weapon immediately." But before Grix could respond, Betty fired a second shell. This one struck even harder, tearing through the already weakened shields and slamming directly into the ship's main engine housing. The Krill scout ship shook violently, sparks flying from damaged systems, smoke pouring from the engine section. "Engine's failing," Grick shouted. "We need to retreat now." Vexthal's face twisted with rage and disbelief as he grabbed the controls, forcing the damaged ship to climb away from the settlement as fast as its failing engines would allow. Down below, Betty Hendricks watched the enemy ship limp away into the sky, smoke trailing behind it. She let out a long breath, her hands finally shaking now that the danger had passed. "That's right," she muttered. "Run home and tell your emperor what real farmers can do." Back aboard the Krill flagship, high above New Terra Colony, Grand Emperor Threxel watched the footage of the damaged scout ship returning, his expression darkening with every passing second. His advisor, a thin, nervous Krill officer named Zarn, stood beside him watching the Emperor's reaction carefully. "My Emperor," Zarn said cautiously, "the scout ship reports significant damage from ground-based weapons at a supposedly undefended farming settlement." Threxel's cold eyes narrowed. "Undefended," they said, "yet it nearly destroyed one of my ships. The weapon appears to be extremely old technology, my Emperor. Decades outdated by our standards. And yet it still worked," Threxel growled, slamming his fist down on the armrest of his throne. "An old, outdated weapon operated by simple farmers damaged a modern Krill scout vessel. Explain this to me, Zarn." Zarn shifted uncomfortably. I cannot explain it fully, my Emperor. Perhaps it was simply luck." Threxel stood up slowly, walking toward the massive viewport that looked down upon the human colony below. His expression was no longer just cold and proud. Now there was something else mixed in, the faintest trace of uncertainty. "I do not believe in luck," Threxel said quietly. "I believe in preparation. And these humans, these supposedly weak, primitive humans, seem far more prepared than my report suggested." Zarn remained silent, sensing his Emperor's growing unease. Threxel continued staring down at the colony, his mind working through what he had just witnessed. A simple farming settlement, with old, outdated weapons, had successfully damaged and driven away one of his advanced scout ships. If farmers could do this much damage with weapons decades old, what could the actual human military do with their full defenses activated? "Send word to the fleet," Threxel said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We attack in full force, no more scouting. No more testing their defenses in small pieces. We crush this colony completely, and we do it now, before they have any more time to prepare." "Yes, my Emperor," Zarn said, bowing quickly before rushing off to relay the orders. Threxel remained at the viewport, staring down at the human colony with narrowed eyes, a small cold knot of doubt forming in his chest for the first time since this war began. "Perhaps," he muttered to himself, "I underestimated you little humans, but I will not make that mistake twice." Down on the colony surface, Elena received the report of the successful defense at Outpost 7 with a small, satisfied nod. Rowan stood beside her, still processing everything he had witnessed and learned over the past few days. "Captain, the old Sentinel gun actually worked," Rowan said, half in disbelief. "Against a modern Krill scout ship." Elena allowed herself a small smile. "Old doesn't always mean weak, Rowan. Sometimes old just means tested, proven, reliable, when it matters most. Do you think this will make the Krill angry, make them attack harder?" Elena's expression grew serious as she looked up at the dark shapes of the Krill fleet still hovering above the colony. "Yes. I imagine Emperor Threxel is furious right now. Wounded pride often leads to angry, reckless decisions." "Is that bad for us?" Elena's eyes remained fixed on the fleet above, calm and steady despite the coming storm. "No, Rowan. An angry enemy is a careless enemy, and a careless enemy is exactly what the old guard was built to defeat." Above them, the Krill fleet began to shift formation, ships moving into attack positions, engines glowing brighter as they prepared for what Threxel now intended to be a swift, crushing assault. The quiet days were over. The real battle was about to begin. The order came at dawn. Grand Emperor Threxel, still burning with anger over the humiliation at Outpost 7, gave the command himself. No more scouting, no more waiting. A full strike force of 50 warships broke away from the main Krill fleet and turned toward New Terra colony, engines glowing bright red against the dark of space. Inside the lead warship, Fleet Commander Karul stood tall on the bridge, his gray skin gleaming under the ship's harsh lighting. He was Threxel's most trusted commander, a veteran of dozens of conquered worlds. He had never lost a battle in his life, and he did not intend to start now against a species he considered barely worth the effort. "Report," Karul said to his tactical officer. 50 ships in formation, Commander. Target colony has minimal orbital defenses detected. This should be a swift victory. Karul allowed himself a small, confident smile. Good. The Emperor wants this dealt with quickly. Begin the approach. On New Terra colony, alarms began sounding across the settlement the moment sensors picked up the Krill strike force moving into attack position. Captain Elena Voss stood in the command center, watching the enemy formation on the main screen with calm, focused eyes. "Captain, 50 ships incoming," Rowan reported, his voice tighter than usual despite everything he had learned these past few days. "That's a massive force for a single colony." Helena studied the formation carefully. "They're overconfident. Look at their spacing, Rowan. Wide formation, minimal defensive coordination. They expect no real resistance. Should we launch the Old Guard fleet now?" Elena shook her head slowly. "Not yet. Let them commit fully to the attack first. We want them deep into our defensive zone before we reveal what we truly have." Rowan swallowed hard. "And if we wait too long?" Elena's eyes didn't leave the screen. "We won't." The Krill strike force descended through the atmosphere, engines roaring, weapon systems fully charged. From the ground it looked like 50 dark blades cutting through the sky, ready to tear the colony apart. The colony's modern defense fleet, small and outdated by Alliance standards, rose to meet them. Perhaps 20 ships total, nowhere near enough to properly challenge the incoming force. To Commander Karul, watching from his bridge, this confirmed everything he expected. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They send 20 ships against 50. Begin the attack." The Krill ships opened fire. Bright energy blasts tore across the sky, and the small human defense fleet scattered, taking evasive maneuvers while returning fire as best they could. Several human ships were struck immediately, shields flaring and failing under the concentrated firepower. "Commander, 2 of ours are down," a soldier reported. Elena watched the screen without flinching, her expression steady even as she saw her own ships taking damage. Rowan glanced at her nervously. "Captain, shouldn't we—" "Wait," Elena said firmly. "Let them push forward. Let them believe they're winning." The battle continued, the human defense fleet fighting hard but clearly outmatched, slowly falling back toward the colony as the Krill force pressed its advantage. Karul watched the retreat with growing satisfaction. "They're falling back exactly as expected," he said to his tactical officer. "Continue the advance, let's finish this quickly." The Krill strike force pushed deeper into the colony's defensive perimeter, chasing the retreating human ships, completely unaware that they were being led directly toward a trap that had been waiting patiently, hidden and silent, for exactly this moment. Deep within the tree-covered valley just beyond the colony's main settlement, the Old Guard fleet waited in complete silence. Massive, heavy warships, built from thick metal plating and armed with weapons that predated most modern Alliance technology, sat powered down and hidden, invisible to standard sensor sweeps thanks to old but effective stealth measures built directly into their ancient hulls. Aboard the flagship Remembrance, pilots and soldiers sat ready in their stations, watching the battle unfold on secondary screens fed from colony sensors. Tension filled the air, thick and heavy, as everyone waited for the signal. A young pilot named Marcus gripped his controls tightly, his knuckles white. Beside him, an older veteran pilot named Chief Torres remained perfectly calm, having seen combat before, though never quite like this. "Chief," Marcus said quietly, "how can you stay so calm? We're about to face 50 enemy warships." Torres glanced over at him with a small, knowing smile. "Kid, I trained for this my whole life without even fully understanding why. My father did the same before me. This moment, It's what the old guard was always meant for. Doesn't that scare you? Torres's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more serious. Being scared and being ready aren't opposites, son. You can feel both at the same time. That's what real courage actually is. On the main bridge, Elena watched the battle screen closely, tracking the krill formation as it advanced deeper into the trap. The krill ships were now completely surrounded on three sides by the hidden valley. Their formations stretched thin as they chased the retreating human defense fleet. "Captain," Rowan said, his voice tense, "they're almost fully inside the kill zone." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly, calculating the final moments carefully. Almost. Just a little further. The retreating human defense fleet pulled back one final time, drawing the last few krill ships fully into position. Karul, watching from his flagship, felt a surge of triumph. "Excellent," he said. "Prepare to..." "Now," Elena said calmly. The valley exploded with light. Hundreds of hidden weapon emplacements built into the very rock and trees of the valley itself opened fire simultaneously. At the same moment, the old guard fleet rose from its hidden position, engines flaring bright blue as massive warships that shouldn't have existed by modern standards surged upward into the battle. Aboard the krill flagship, alarms blared instantly as sensors detected the sudden massive surge in enemy firepower. "Commander, multiple new contacts, ground-based weapons and warships, Commander. Large warships appearing from nowhere." Karul's confident expression shattered into shock. "Impossible! Where did they come from?" The old guard fleet surged into the battle with devastating precision. Ship captains who had trained their entire lives for exactly this moment executed maneuvers passed down through generations, tactics designed specifically to counter larger, overconfident enemy formations. The Remembrance led the charge, its heavy weapons tearing through krill shields with brutal efficiency. Marcus, gripping his controls tightly, followed Chief Torres's lead perfectly, weaving through enemy fire with maneuvers that felt strange and unfamiliar, yet somehow completely natural, like muscle memory passed down through blood itself. "Focus fire on their command ship," Elena's voice rang out across the fleet communication channel, steady and clear despite the chaos of battle. "Break their formation from the center." The old guard ships responded instantly, converging their fire on Karul's flagship. The massive krill vessel shuddered under the combined assault, shields flaring bright before beginning to crack under the pressure. "Commander, shields at 40% and falling," a panicked officer reported. "We're taking damage from multiple directions." Karul stared at the battle unfolding before him in complete disbelief. Ships he had never seen before, weapons technology his sensors couldn't even properly identify, tactics that seemed almost impossibly well coordinated. All of it contradicted everything he thought he knew about human military capability. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "Their fleet was supposedly outdated, weak. Commander, we're losing ships," his tactical officer interrupted urgently. "Third squadron destroyed, fifth squadron falling back in disarray." Karul watched his carefully coordinated attack force crumble before his eyes. Krill warships exploding one after another as the old guard fleet tore through their ranks with terrifying efficiency. This was not the swift, easy victory he had promised the Emperor. This was a massacre, and his forces were the ones being slaughtered. "Fall back," Karul finally shouted, pride giving way to desperate survival instinct. "All ships retreat immediately." But retreat was not easy. The old guard fleet had positioned itself perfectly, cutting off easy escape routes, forcing the remaining krill ships into a desperate, chaotic scramble back toward orbit. Aboard the Remembrance, Elena watched the battle turn decisively in humanity's favor, her expression still calm, though a small measure of quiet satisfaction had crept into her eyes. "Captain, they're retreating," Rowan reported, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We're actually winning." "Continue pressing the advantage," Elena said, "but do not pursue them into open space. Let them retreat back to the main fleet. We want the Emperor to see exactly what happened here." "Understood, Captain." The remaining krill ships fled upward through the atmosphere, badly damaged, formations completely broken. nothing like the confident strike force that had descended just hours earlier. Of the 50 ships that had begun the attack, barely 20 remained capable of flight, limping back toward the main fleet in humiliating disarray. Down in the valley, the old guard fleet regrouped, powering down slightly as the immediate threat retreated. Marcus let out a long, shaky breath, adrenaline still coursing through his system. "Chief," he said, voice trembling slightly, "we actually did it. We beat them." Torres nodded slowly, his expression serious despite the victory. "We did, kid. But remember, this was just the first real test. Threxel won't take this loss quietly. He'll come back angrier and probably smarter next time." "How do you know that?" Torres's eyes grew distant, remembering old stories passed down from his own father. Stories about the terrible enemy from humanity's forgotten war. "Because pride wounded is far more dangerous than pride intact, kid. We just made an enemy of the entire Krill Empire personally. That's not something they'll forgive or forget easily." Aboard the main Krill flagship, high above the colony, Grand Emperor Threxel watched the retreating remains of his strike force with an expression that had shifted from anger to something far colder, far more dangerous. Karul stood before him, badly shaken, his proud demeanor completely gone. "My Emperor, I cannot fully explain what happened. Ships appeared from nowhere, weapons technology we had no records of, tactics that seemed almost impossibly precise." "Silence," Threxel said quietly, his voice carrying more threat in its calmness than any shout could have managed. Karul immediately fell silent, bowing his head. Threxel walked slowly toward the massive viewport, staring down at the human colony below, his mind working through everything he had just witnessed. 50 of his finest warships, sent against a colony believed to have minimal defenses, had been decisively defeated by a hidden fleet using technology and tactics that shouldn't have existed according to every piece of intelligence his empire possessed. Behind him, his nervous advisor Zarn approached cautiously. "My Emperor, shall I prepare the main fleet for a full assault? We could crush this colony with our complete force in a single overwhelming strike." Threxel remained silent for a long moment, staring down at the colony with narrowed, calculating eyes. "No," he finally said. "Not yet." Zarn blinked in surprise. "My Emperor?" Threxel turned slowly, his expression cold and thoughtful. "Something is wrong here, Zarn. Humans were documented as weak, primitive, barely capable of basic interstellar defense, yet they possess hidden fleets, advanced tactics, and weapons technology completely absent from any Alliance or Krill intelligence report. What are you suggesting, my Emperor?" "I am suggesting," Threxel said slowly, "that these humans have been hiding something from the entire galaxy, something significant, something dangerous enough that they felt the need to bury it completely from Alliance records." Zarn's antennae twitched nervously. "Should we be concerned, my Emperor?" Threxel's cold eyes turned back toward the human colony below, his expression unreadable. "I did not survive 300 years of conquest by underestimating my enemies twice. Before we commit our full fleet, I want answers. I want to know exactly what these humans are hiding and why." "How do you propose we find that, my Emperor?" Threxel's lips curled into a cold, calculating smile. "Every species has a weakness, Zarn. Every secret has a way of being uncovered. We will find theirs, one way or another. And when we do, we will use it to crush them completely, once and for all." Down on New Terra Colony, Elena stood on the command platform, watching the last remnants of the Krill strike force retreat back toward the main fleet in the distance. Rowan stood beside her, still processing the incredible victory they had just achieved. "Captain," he said quietly, "we won. We actually won against a Krill strike force." Elena's expression remained calm, though there was something serious in her eyes as she watched the retreating enemy ships. "We won this battle, Rowan, but remember, this was never about winning one battle. Threxel commands an empire that has conquered dozens of worlds over 3 centuries. This was merely his first, most careless attempt." "You think he'll come back stronger?" Elena's eyes remained fixed on the distant Krill fleet, her expression thoughtful and cautious despite their victory. I think Emperor Threxel just learned something today that will haunt him far more than losing 50 ships ever could. What's that, Captain? Elena finally turned to look at Rowan, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of old, hard-earned wisdom passed down through generations. He learned that humanity remembers how to fight, she said. And now he'll spend every resource he has trying to understand exactly what that means before he dares to commit his full empire against us again. In the distance, the damaged Krill strike force disappeared back into the massive fleet still hovering above the colony, carrying with them the first taste of a truth the entire galaxy was about to discover. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was waiting. And somewhere, deep within ancient buried records that even the Alliance couldn't access, the true story of humanity's forgotten war remained hidden, waiting for the right moment to finally be revealed. 5 days after the battle in the valley, the Alliance Council Hall was louder than it had ever been. News of the human victory against 50 Krill warships had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species in the Alliance was talking about it. Some were amazed, some were afraid. Almost all of them had the same question. How? Dr. Yara Vex sat at her desk again, the same locked file glowing on her screen. Access denied by human government authority. She had stared at those words for 15 years. But today, something was different. Today, she had a new visitor. A knock came at her door, softer than usual. "Come in," Yara said. The door opened, and an old human woman stepped inside, leaning slightly on a cane. She had silver hair pulled back into a neat bun, and sharp, tired eyes that had clearly seen many things. Yara recognized her immediately from old Alliance records. "Admiral Voss," Yara said, standing up in surprise. "Elena's grandmother. I wasn't expecting you." The old woman, whose name was Margaret Voss, smiled faintly and lowered herself into the chair across from Yara's desk. "I know you weren't, Dr. Vex, but I think it's time someone finally answered your questions properly." Yara sat back down slowly, her heart beating a little faster. 15 years of searching, and finally, someone was willing to talk. "Why now?" Yara asked. "Why after all this time?" Margaret's eyes grew distant, tired in a way that went beyond simple age. "Because my granddaughter just woke up ships that were built to fight a war none of you know about. And if this war with the Krill continues, the whole galaxy is going to see things we spent 200 years trying to bury. Better you hear the truth from me calmly, than watch it unfold in chaos." Yara leaned forward, her old scientific curiosity burning brighter than ever. "Please, Admiral, tell me everything." Margaret took a slow breath, her hands folding in her lap. "It began almost 200 years ago, before humanity ever met another species in the stars. Back then, we thought we were alone in the galaxy. We were wrong." Margaret's story unfolded slowly, carefully, like a wound being unwrapped after a very long time. 2 centuries ago, human explorers pushed deep into the edges of their own solar system, searching for resources on distant moons and asteroids. What they found instead was something ancient, buried deep beneath the ice of a frozen moon on the outer edge of their system. A signal, a structure, something that wasn't human and wasn't natural either. At first, the discovery brought excitement. Humanity believed they had found proof of alien life, evidence that they weren't truly alone in the universe. Scientists studied the structure eagerly, unaware that they were waking something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. It called itself the Devourer Swarm. It wasn't a single enemy, not in the way the Krill Empire was. It was worse. A collective intelligence, ancient beyond human understanding, made of countless small machines that could consume matter and multiply endlessly, growing stronger with everything it destroyed. The swarm had been dormant for millennia, waiting on that frozen moon, until human curiosity accidentally triggered its awakening. Within months, entire research stations were consumed. Within a year, the swarm had spread across the outer solar system, consuming asteroids, moons, anything it could reach, growing larger and more dangerous with every passing day. Humanity, still new to serious space warfare, still learning how to survive beyond their own homeworld, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that threatened complete extinction. We had no allies then, Margaret said quietly. No alliance. No other species to call for help. Just us, alone, against something that seemed unstoppable. Yara listened in stunned silence, her mind racing to process everything she was hearing. What did you do? She asked softly. Margaret's eyes grew distant, remembering stories passed down from her own grandmother, who had lived through those terrible years herself. We fought. We had no choice. Entire cities were evacuated as the swarm pushed closer to our homeworld. Billions of lives were at risk. Humanity's greatest scientists and military minds worked together day and night, developing new weapons, new tactics, anything that might slow the swarm down. Did it work? Slowly, Margaret said. We learned that the swarm, despite its terrifying power, had weaknesses. It grew through consumption, but it could be damaged by heavy, blunt force weapons that overwhelmed its ability to repair itself quickly. Modern, delicate energy weapons, ironically, were less effective than older, heavier projectile weapons that caused massive, immediate damage. Yara's eyes widened slightly, understanding dawning. The old ship designs, the old weapons, the old guard fleet. Margaret nodded slowly. Everything Elena used against the Krill, all the old technology and tactics, they were originally developed to fight the swarm. Heavy armor to withstand its corrosive attacks. Blunt, powerful weapons to destroy its structures faster than it could repair them. Close combat training because sometimes the swarm's smaller forms could infiltrate ships and energy weapons weren't always practical in tight spaces. How did the war finally end? Margaret's expression grew heavier, more solemn. After nearly 15 years of brutal fighting, humanity finally developed a weapon capable of truly destroying the swarm's core intelligence, not just its physical forms. A massive, coordinated strike, using every resource humanity had left, targeted the swarm's original source, the frozen moon where it had first been discovered. Did it work? Yes, Margaret said quietly, but at a terrible cost. Nearly a third of humanity's population at the time was lost during those 15 years of war. Entire cities destroyed. Countless families broken. By the time the swarm was finally defeated, humanity was exhausted, traumatized, and desperate to forget the horror they had just survived. Yara sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing the weight of everything she had just learned. That's why the records were locked away. Why the history was buried. Margaret nodded slowly. Our leaders back then made a difficult choice. They decided that future generations shouldn't carry the full weight of that trauma. They rebuilt human society, quietly incorporated the lessons learned into military tradition and training, but buried the full details of the war itself. They wanted humanity to move forward, not live forever in fear of what had almost destroyed us. But the technology remained. The tactics remained. Yes, Margaret said. Passed down quietly, generation to generation, through military families like my own. We kept the old ships maintained, hidden in secure locations, just in case humanity ever needed them again. Yara looked up, her eyes sharp with sudden realization. You think the Krill Empire might be connected to the swarm somehow? Margaret shook her head slowly. No, Dr. Vex. The Krill are a different threat entirely, a proud empire, not a mindless collective. But the tactics we developed against the swarm, the heavy weapons, the close combat training, the coordinated ambush strategies, they work remarkably well against any overconfident enemy that underestimates raw human resilience and coordination. So the Krill are facing weapons and tactics developed for an entirely different, more terrifying war. Exactly, Margaret said. And that is why they are currently so confused and so afraid, even if they don't yet understand why. Back on New Terra Colony, Elena Voss stood in the underground hangar, watching engineers repair minor damage on several old guard ships from the recent battle. Rowan approached her, holding a datapad with a troubled expression. Captain, he said, I just received a message from Alliance Command. Dr. Yara Vex has requested a direct conversation with you. She says your grandmother already spoke with her. Elena's expression grew serious. She had known this moment would eventually come, ever since Directive 01 had been activated. Patch her through. A moment later, Yara's face appeared on a nearby screen, her expression a complex mixture of scientific curiosity and genuine, deep sympathy. "Captain Voss," Yara said, "your grandmother told me everything, about the Devourer swarm, about the true history of your species' old war." Elena's expression remained calm, though something heavy shifted behind her eyes. "Then you understand now why we kept it hidden." "I do," Yara said softly. "I understand the pain your species carries even generations later. I'm truly sorry for everything humanity endured, Captain." Elena nodded slowly, appreciating the sincerity in Yara's voice. "Thank you, Dr. Vex. But right now we have a different problem to deal with. Emperor Threxul is not the swarm. He's ambitious, proud, and dangerous in his own way. But he's rational. That means he can still be reasoned with or defeated through strength and clear strategy. The Alliance Council is deeply concerned about the revelation of your hidden fleet," Yara said carefully. "Some delegates feel humanity has been deceptive." Elena's eyes hardened slightly. "We weren't deceptive, Dr. Vex. We were protecting ourselves, and honestly, protecting the galaxy from unnecessary fear. If the Alliance had known the full truth about our old war, about the swarm, about what we barely survived, would you have trusted us as equal members? Or would you have feared us as a dangerous unknown?" Yara was quiet for a moment, considering the question honestly. I don't know, Captain, perhaps both." "Exactly," Elena said. "So we made a choice. We chose to be your allies, your friends, without carrying the shadow of our past constantly over every interaction. But now, faced with the Krill Empire's aggression, we have no choice but to reveal what we truly are." "And what exactly are you, Captain Voss?" "Truly?" Elena's eyes grew distant for a moment, remembering old stories her grandmother had told her as a child. Stories of a terrible war fought against an enemy that nearly ended humanity completely. "We are survivors," Elena said quietly. "We faced true extinction once. And instead of breaking, we adapted. We grew stronger and we learned lessons that we hoped we would never need again. But here we are, Dr. Vex, needing them once more." Yara nodded slowly, a newfound respect clear in her eyes. "The Alliance will need to understand this properly, Captain. Perhaps humanity should tell your full story publicly. Show the galaxy exactly what you survived and why you are the way you are." Elena considered this for a long moment. "Perhaps you're right, Dr. Vex. Perhaps it's finally time the galaxy understood exactly who they welcomed into their alliance all those years ago." Meanwhile, aboard the Krill flagship, Emperor Threxul received a report from his intelligence officers, information gathered through secretive Alliance contacts sympathetic to Krill interests. "My Emperor," Zarn said cautiously, presenting the report, "we have information regarding the human species' hidden history. It appears humanity fought a devastating war centuries ago against a mysterious, non-Alliance threat known as the Devourer swarm." Threxul's eyes narrowed with interest as he read through the report quickly. A war that nearly destroyed them completely, yet they survived, and secretly maintained the technology and tactics developed during that conflict. "Yes, my Emperor. It appears their current defensive capabilities stem directly from lessons learned fighting this ancient threat." Threxul's cold expression shifted into something calculating, almost respectful, despite himself. "Interesting. These humans are more resilient than I initially believed. Survivors of true extinction-level warfare, hiding their true strength behind a facade of primitive weakness. Does this change our strategy, my Emperor?" Threxul stood slowly, walking toward the viewport, staring down at the human colony with newfound consideration. "It confirms what I suspected all along, Zarn. These humans are not weak. They are simply cautious, patient, and dangerously prepared, hiding their true capabilities until absolutely necessary." Shall we retreat, my Emperor? Reconsider this war entirely. Threxel's expression hardened instantly, pride overtaking caution once again. No, the Krill Empire does not retreat, regardless of the enemy's hidden strength. If anything, this new information only confirms that defeating humanity now, before they grow even stronger, is absolutely necessary. What are your orders, my Emperor? Threxel turned fully, his eyes cold and determined. Prepare the full fleet, Zarn. Every ship, every soldier, everything the Krill Empire possesses in this sector. If humanity wishes to prove themselves worthy adversaries, then we shall grant them the honor of facing our complete, overwhelming might. And if they prove too strong, my Emperor? Threxel's cold smile returned, sharp and dangerous. Then perhaps, Zarn, we shall finally understand exactly why this galaxy should have feared humanity from the very beginning. Far below, unaware of the storm quickly gathering above them, humanity continued preparing, drawing strength from a painful hidden history finally beginning to surface after 200 years of silence. The galaxy was about to learn the truth, and humanity, scarred but unbroken, was ready to show them exactly what that truth meant. 7 days after the declaration of war, the sky above New Terra Colony finally changed. The scattered Krill fleet that had hovered for over a week suddenly pulled together into one massive formation. Every ship Emperor Threxel had in the sector, nearly 400 warships, moved into position above the colony. It was the largest single fleet the human defenders had ever seen with their own eyes. Inside the command center, Captain Elena Voss watched the sensor readings with a still, steady face, though even she felt the weight of what was coming. Captain, Rowan said, his voice tight. Sensor count confirms 390 Krill warships. That's nearly their entire regional fleet. Elena's eyes moved slowly across the screen, taking in the size of the enemy formation. Threxel isn't holding anything back this time. He wants this finished in a single stroke. Do we have enough ships to face that, Captain? Even with the full old guard fleet awake? Elena turned to him, her expression calm but serious. No, Rowan, not alone. Which is why we're not facing them alone. As if on cue, a new signal chimed on the command console. Rowan checked it quickly and his eyes widened. Captain, it's the Alliance fleet. Commander Thessa is hailing us. She says the Alliance Council has approved emergency reinforcement. Elena allowed a small, tight smile. Dr. Vex and Admiral Grant must have finally convinced them. On the main screen, dozens of Alliance warships began dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, a mixed fleet of different alien species, all united under a single banner for the first time since the war began. Commander Thessa's face appeared on the screen, her silver skin calm but her eyes sharp with determination. Captain Voss, the Alliance fleet stands ready to support humanity in this battle. We have seen what you can do. Now let us show you what we can do together. Elena nodded firmly. Thank you, Commander. Form up on our position. We'll need every ship we have. Aboard the Krill flagship, Emperor Threxel watched the arriving Alliance reinforcements with a cold, calculating expression. Beside him, Zarn shifted nervously. My Emperor, the Alliance has committed additional forces. Our fleet still outnumbers them significantly, but this complicates the battle. Threxel's eyes narrowed. It changes nothing, Zarn. Numbers alone do not win wars. Overwhelming force, properly applied, always wins. He turned to his tactical officer. Divide the fleet into 3 attack groups. We will crush their formation from multiple directions at once, giving them no time to organize a proper defense. Yes, my Emperor. And Zarn, Threxel added, his voice colder now, target the human flagship directly, the one called Remembrance. If we destroy their symbol of resistance, the rest will break. The battle began with a wall of fire. 390 Krill warships surged forward in 3 massive attack groups, weapons blazing, engines roaring. The combined human and Alliance fleet, numbering just over 200 ships total, moved to meet them, forming a tight defensive formation around the colony, space filled with light and destruction. Energy blasts crossed in every direction, ships exploding in bright flashes, debris scattering across the battlefield like broken glass. The Remembrance led the human fleet, its heavy guns tearing through Krill shields, while smaller Alliance ships used speed and precision to strike at weaker points in the enemy formation. Aboard the Remembrance, Elena stood at the command station, watching the chaotic battle unfold across multiple screens, her voice calm and clear as she issued orders. "Thessa, pull your fastest ships to the eastern flank. The Krill are trying to encircle us from that side." "Copy that, Captain," Thessa's voice replied through the comm. Marcus, piloting one of the smaller Old Guard fighters alongside Chief Torres, weaved through a storm of enemy fire, weapons blazing at a Krill cruiser twice the size of his ship. "Chief, they keep sending more ships. It feels like we're barely holding the line." Torres's voice remained steady over the comm. "Keep your focus, kid. Remember your training. Hit their weak points, not their strong ones." The battle raged for what felt like hours, both sides taking heavy losses. Ships from both fleets burned and drifted lifelessly through space. The human and Alliance forces fought with everything they had, but the sheer size of the Krill fleet slowly began to press them backward, closer and closer to the colony itself. "Captain," Rowan reported, his voice strained. "We're losing ground. The eastern flank is buckling under pressure." Elena's eyes narrowed as she studied the battle map. The Krill formation, despite its size, showed a specific pattern, a slow tightening noose designed to trap the defenders against the colony with no room to maneuver. "They're trying to pin us down," Elena said. "Threxel wants to finish this with one final crushing blow." "What do we do, Captain?" Elena's mind worked quickly, drawing on old tactics passed down through generations, lessons learned fighting an enemy far more terrifying than the Krill. "We can't outmuscle their entire fleet directly. We need to break their coordination instead, target their command ships. If we can disrupt their communication and control, their numbers won't matter as much." "Their flagship is heavily protected, Captain. Getting close enough will be extremely dangerous." Elena's eyes hardened with quiet determination. "Then we'll need to be precise, not safe. Rowan, gather our fastest strike team. We're taking the fight directly to Threxel." The Krill flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and shields, sat protected at the center of the enemy formation, surrounded by dozens of escort ships. Breaking through to it seemed nearly impossible under normal circumstances, but Elena had a plan built from old, hard-earned lessons. "Thessa," Elena said over the comm, "I need your fastest Alliance ships to create a diversion on the northern flank. Draw their escort ships away from the flagship, even briefly." "Understood, Captain. It will cost us ships, but we'll do it." "Marcus Torres," Elena continued, "you're with me. We're taking the Remembrance and a small strike group directly toward the flagship the moment that opening appears." "Copy that, Captain," Torres replied, his voice steady despite the danger of the plan. Thessa's Alliance ships surged toward the northern flank, engaging the Krill escorts in a fierce sacrificial assault designed purely to draw attention away from the center. The Krill ships, seeing a sudden aggressive push, redirected several escort squadrons to counter it, exactly as Elena had hoped. A narrow gap opened near the Krill flagship, brief but real. "Now," Elena commanded. The Remembrance surged forward, along with a small strike group of Old Guard fighters cutting directly through the gap in the enemy formation. Weapons fire crossed around them as remaining escort ships scrambled to respond, but the human strike force moved with practiced precision, weaving through the chaos toward their target. Aboard the Krill flagship, alarms blared as sensors detected the incoming human ships. "My Emperor!" Zarn shouted, alarm clear in his voice. "The human flagship is breaking through our defenses, heading directly toward us." Threxel's eyes widened slightly, a rare flicker of genuine surprise crossing his cold features. "Impossible. Redirect all nearby ships to intercept immediately." But it was too late. The Remembrance and its strike group had already closed the distance, weapons targeting the flagship's shield generators with precise, coordinated fire. The Krill flagship's shields flared brightly under the assault, cracking under the concentrated attack. "Shields failing on the port side," a Krill officer shouted. Elena's voice rang out firm and clear across her strike team's comm channel. "Target their shield generators, then prepare for boarding. We end this now directly. Boarding, Captain? Rowan's voice came through shocked. That's incredibly risky. Threxel needs to understand exactly who he's dealing with, Elena said, her voice hard with determination. Sometimes a message needs to be delivered in person. The Krill flagship's shields finally collapsed under the sustained assault, sparking and failing completely. Elena's strike group moved in swiftly, docking clamps extending from the Remembrance, locking onto the massive enemy vessel's hull. Boarding party, move out, Elena commanded, grabbing her own weapon and helmet. Rowan looked at her in disbelief. Captain, you're leading the boarding party personally? Elena's eyes were steady, calm, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had trained her entire life for exactly this moment. Some battles need to be finished face to face, Rowan. Follow me. The airlock hissed open, revealing the dark alien corridors of the Krill flagship beyond. Elena stepped forward first, weapon raised, her strike team close behind her, moving swiftly and silently into enemy territory. Somewhere deep within that ship, Emperor Threxel waited, still in disbelief that humans had breached his flagship's defenses so completely. Alarms echoed through the Krill vessel's corridors as Elena's team advanced steadily deeper, each step bringing them closer to a confrontation that would decide the fate of this entire war. Behind them, outside in the chaos of space, the battle raged on fiercely, both fleets locked in a desperate struggle, neither side willing to back down. But inside the flagship, a different battle was about to begin, one that would determine everything. Elena Voss moved forward calmly through the dark corridors, her strike team close behind, heading directly toward the heart of the enemy fleet, toward Emperor Threxel himself. The fate of the war rested on what happened next. The corridors of the Krill flagship were dark and narrow, lit only by flickering emergency lights that cast long shadows along the metal walls. Alarms echoed distantly, mixed with the sound of the ongoing battle rattling the entire ship. Captain Elena Voss moved forward steadily, her strike team close behind her, weapons ready, footsteps quiet and controlled. Rowan stayed close to her side, his heart pounding, though he tried hard to match her calm composure. Captain, how do you know where to find Threxel? This ship is massive. Elena's eyes stayed focused ahead, reading the corridor markings with practiced ease. Every warship follows a similar design logic, regardless of species. Command centers are always near the ship's core, protected on all sides. Emperor Threxel will be there, directing the battle personally. And if he has heavy guards waiting for us? Elena's expression remained steady, though a small, determined edge entered her voice. Then we adapt, Rowan. Just like we always have. They moved deeper into the ship, occasionally encountering small groups of startled Krill soldiers, quickly and efficiently subdued by the strike team's precise, practiced tactics. Chief Torres, moving alongside Marcus at the rear of the group, kept a watchful eye behind them, ensuring no one followed. Finally, they reached a massive set of reinforced doors, guarded by a dozen heavily armed Krill soldiers. Elena raised her hand, signaling her team to stop. That's the command center, she said quietly. Threxel is beyond those doors. 12 guards, Captain, Torres said, assessing the situation. Heavily armored. This won't be easy. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly, her mind working through old tactics passed down through generations. We don't need easy, Chief. We need effective. The confrontation was brief but intense. Elena's strike team moved with practiced precision, using the tight corridor to their advantage, engaging the guards in controlled bursts rather than a chaotic firefight. Old training, close combat skills passed down from a war fought long ago, proved decisive against guards who had never faced an enemy willing to fight this close. This personally. Within minutes, the guards were subdued, and the reinforced doors before them hissed open. Inside, Grand Emperor Threxel stood at the center of his command center, surrounded by tactical officers frantically working to manage the chaotic battle outside. He turned sharply as Elena and her team entered, his cold eyes widening slightly in genuine surprise. You, Threxel said, his voice carrying disbelief and fury in equal measure. You dare to board my flagship personally? Elena stepped forward calmly, her weapon lowered but ready, her strike team spreading out behind her, covering the room. "Emperor Threxel, I believe it's time we spoke directly." Threxel's tactical officers moved defensively, but a sharp gesture from their emperor stopped them. Threxel studied Elena carefully, his cold expression shifting slowly from anger into something more thoughtful, almost curious. "You are the one who commands the old ships," Threxel said. "The hidden fleet. Voss, was it?" "Captain Elena Voss," she confirmed. Threxel studied her for a long moment. "I have learned much about your species these past few days, Captain Voss. About your hidden war, your forgotten history, your resilience." Elena's eyes remained steady. "Then you understand why this war you started was a mistake, Emperor." Threxel's expression hardened slightly, old pride resurfacing despite everything. "The Krill Empire has never lost a war in 3 centuries, Captain. Pride and strength built this empire. I will not simply surrender because a single species proved more resilient than initially reported." "Then look outside your own viewport, Emperor," Elena said calmly, gesturing toward the massive window showing the chaotic battle still raging beyond. "Your fleet is being decisively pushed back. Your flagship has been boarded. Your command center is currently under my control. This war is already lost whether your pride accepts it or not." Threxel's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking briefly toward the ongoing battle outside, ships burning and falling on both sides, though the tide had clearly turned in humanity's favor since the human and alliance forces had broken through his central formation. "What do you want, Captain Voss?" Threxel finally asked, his voice quieter now, heavy with reluctant acceptance. "Surrender? Humiliation?" Elena shook her head slowly. "No, Emperor. I want this war to end, with as few additional lives lost as possible on both sides. Humanity does not seek conquest or revenge. We seek only to protect what is ours, and to live peacefully within this galaxy." Threxel studied her carefully, searching for deception, finding none. "Even after everything my empire has done, the lives lost on both sides, especially after everything that has happened," Elena said firmly. "Humanity understands better than most the true cost of prolonged, needless war. We do not wish that fate upon anyone else, not even an enemy who once sought our destruction." A long, heavy silence filled the command center as Threxel considered her words carefully, his cold, calculating mind weighing pride against the harsh reality of his current situation. Finally, his shoulders relaxed slightly, an old, weary acceptance settling over his proud features. "Order a full retreat," Threxel said quietly to his tactical officers. "All Krill forces stand down immediately. This war is over." The battle outside slowly ceased as Krill ships began powering down their weapons, retreating from the chaotic battlefield under direct orders from their emperor. Cheers erupted across human and alliance ships as the realization spread, the massive Krill fleet withdrawing, defeated. Aboard the Remembrance, Rowan let out a long breath of relief, lowering his weapon finally. "Captain, we actually did it. We won." Elena allowed herself a small, genuine smile, the weight of the past week finally beginning to lift from her shoulders. "We did, Rowan. Together." Threxel watched quietly as his fleet retreated, his expression unreadable, though something resembling respect had settled into his cold eyes. "You fight with more honor than I expected, Captain Voss. Perhaps the stories about your species were incomplete." "Perhaps you'll take the time to learn the full story, Emperor," Elena replied, "rather than assuming based on incomplete reports next time." Threxel nodded slowly, a rare gesture of genuine acknowledgement. "Perhaps I will, Captain." In the days that followed, the news of humanity's victory spread rapidly across the entire galaxy. The Alliance Council Hall, once filled with doubt and suspicion toward humanity's hidden fleet, now buzzed with a completely different atmosphere. Respect, curiosity, and genuine admiration. Dr. Yarovec stood before the full council, presenting a detailed report on humanity's true history, the terrible war against the Devourer swarm, and the difficult sacrifices made to protect not just humanity, but ultimately the entire galaxy, from a threat that could have eventually spread far beyond human space. Humanity's caution in revealing their full history was never about deception, Yara explained to the assembled delegates. It was about protecting future generations from the trauma of their past, while quietly preparing themselves in case that darkness ever returned. Counselor Dross, once one of humanity's harshest critics, sat quietly, his earlier anger replaced by thoughtful consideration. Perhaps we owe humanity a formal apology for doubting their intentions so quickly. Sella, standing at the center of the hall, nodded in agreement. Humanity has proven, beyond any doubt, their value as equal partners within this alliance, not through weakness, but through quiet, resilient strength. Back on New Terra Colony, life slowly returned to normal, though nothing would ever quite be the same again. Elena stood once more in the underground hangar, watching engineers carefully returning the old guard fleet to its resting position, ready should humanity ever need it again, though hopefully not for a very long time. Rowan approached her, his earlier nervousness now replaced by quiet confidence, having witnessed and participated in one of the most significant events in recent human history. "Captain," he said, "what happens now? To the old guard, I mean." Elena watched the massive ship slowly returning to their hidden positions, engines powering down gently. "They'll rest again, Rowan, hopefully for a long time, but they'll always remain ready, should humanity ever need them." "Do you think the galaxy will look at us differently now?" Elena considered this thoughtfully. "Yes, Rowan, I believe they will. Not with fear, hopefully, but with genuine understanding and respect. We've shown them that our strength comes not from aggression, but from resilience, patience, and the hard lessons learned through genuine hardship." Rowan nodded slowly, glancing toward the resting fleet one final time. "It's strange, Captain. Before all this happened, I never truly understood who we really were, as a species." Elena's expression softened slightly, a rare glimpse of genuine warmth breaking through her usual calm composure. "None of us fully understood, Rowan. Sometimes it takes moments like these, difficult and painful as they are, to truly discover who we really are." Later that evening, Elena stood quietly on a balcony overlooking the colony, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft oranges and purples, peaceful once more after the chaos of recent days. Dr. Yara Vex joined her, having traveled personally to New Terra Colony to witness the aftermath firsthand. "Captain Voss," Yara said softly, standing beside her, "I wanted to personally thank you for trusting me with your species' true history." Elena nodded slightly, her eyes still on the horizon. "You earned that trust, Dr. Vex, through genuine curiosity, patience, and respect." Yara smiled gently. "May I ask you something personal, Captain?" "Of course." "Do you regret the secrecy?" Yara asked carefully. "The years of hidden history buried away from the rest of the galaxy?" Elena considered the question thoughtfully, her eyes distant, remembering old stories passed down through generations, painful, yet meaningful. "No, Dr. Vex. I don't regret it. Sometimes protecting future generations from unnecessary pain is worth the burden of carrying that weight quietly alone. And now that the truth is finally known?" Elena's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, watching the peaceful sunset settle gently over her homeworld. "Now, perhaps we can move forward honestly, as equals within this galaxy, no longer hiding who we truly are." Yara nodded, understanding fully now the depth and resilience behind humanity's quiet, unassuming nature. "The galaxy learned something important today, Captain Voss," Yara said softly. Elena turned to her, curious. "What's that, Dr. Vex?" Yara's eyes moved toward the horizon, watching the sun finally disappear beneath the hills, plunging the sky into a peaceful twilight. "That you should never underestimate a species that has already survived the end of their own world once before," Yara said quietly. "Because when they smile calmly in the face of overwhelming danger, it's not because they're foolish or unaware. It's because they faced worse and they remembered exactly how to win." Elena's eyes reflected the fading light, calm, steady, and quietly proud. "That's precisely who we are, Dr. Vex," she said softly. "That's exactly who humanity has always been. Above them, The stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, silent witnesses to a galaxy forever changed by the quiet strength of a species finally understood, respected, and welcomed fully into the community of stars. The war was over, but humanity's story, resilient and unbroken, was only just beginning. The end.